Detective Sarah Anderson and Detective Mark Reynolds in Cartel's operation.
Detective Sarah Anderson sat in her unmarked police car, parked across the street from the abandoned warehouse. The night was dark, with a heavy rain pouring down, but she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for months. Sarah had been tracking a notorious drug cartel, and tonight was the night she would finally bring them down. Her partner, Detective Mark Reynolds, sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the warehouse. Both detectives were well aware of the risks involved, but their determination to end the cartel's reign of terror fueled their every move. Mark asked, breaking the silence.
"Are you ready for this, Sarah?"
Sarah nodded, her eyes focused on the warehouse.
"I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. It's time to put an end to their operation."
As they prepared to make their move, Sarah's radio crackled to life.
"This is Central Command. We've received a tip that the cartel members are planning to move a large shipment of drugs tonight. Proceed with caution."
Sarah acknowledged the message, and she and Mark exited the car, donning their bulletproof vests and checking their weapons. They moved silently through the rain-soaked alleyways, inching closer to the warehouse. The sound of footsteps grew louder as they approached the entrance. Sarah signaled to Mark, and they burst through the door, guns drawn. Inside, they found themselves face to face with several armed cartel members. Sarah shouted, her voice filled with authority.
"Nobody move. Drop your weapons and put your hands in the air."
The cartel members hesitated for a moment, but the glint of defiance in their eyes quickly disappeared as they realized the futility of resistance. One by one, they dropped their weapons and raised their hands. As Sarah and Mark handcuffed the captives, the warehouse door swung open, and a tall, menacing figure stepped inside. It was Diego Ramirez, the cartel's ruthless leader. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene before him. Diego sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance.
"You think you can stop me, detective? You're just a pawn in a much bigger game."
Sarah stood tall, undeterred by Diego's words.
"Maybe so, but tonight, your game ends."
Diego's laughter echoed through the warehouse, sending a chill down Sarah's spine.
"You underestimate me, detective. You have no idea what you're up against."
Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the shadows, catching everyone off guard. Sarah dove for cover, pulling Mark down with her. Bullets whizzed past them as they returned fire, their training kicking in.
"Backup requested. We need backup."
Their assailants, cartel members who had been hiding in the warehouse, were quickly outnumbering them. Sarah knew they needed to hold out until backup arrived. She exchanged a glance with Mark, and they nodded in unison. With calculated precision, Sarah and Mark maneuvered through the chaos, taking down cartel members one by one. The intensity of the gunfight grew, each shot fired echoing through the warehouse. Adrenaline coursed through Sarah's veins as she fought to protect herself and her partner. Finally, the sound of sirens filled the air as backup arrived. The warehouse was soon flooded with police officers, overwhelming the remaining cartel members. The firefight came to an end, and silence settled over the scene. Sarah approached Diego, his once defiant demeanor replaced by a look of defeat.
"Your empire is crumbling. It's over."
Diego glared at her, but his words held a hint of resignation.
"You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over."
Sarah smiled, a sense of triumph filling her as she looked at Diego.
"We'll see about that. The law always catches up to criminals like you."
Diego was taken into custody, his reign of terror finally coming to an end. The police officers began securing the area, collecting evidence, and ensuring the safety of everyone involved. As the rain poured outside, Sarah and Mark took a moment to catch their breath. The adrenaline rush slowly faded, leaving behind a deep sense of satisfaction. They had successfully dismantled a major drug operation and apprehended its leader. The sound of footsteps approached, and their captain, Captain Roberts, appeared. He was a stern but fair man who commanded respect from his team. Captain Roberts said, a hint of pride in his voice.
You two handled the situation admirably. This is a significant blow to the cartel.
Sarah and Mark nodded, grateful for their captain's acknowledgement. They knew, however, that their job wasn't done. There were still investigations to be conducted, court proceedings to go through, and other criminals to apprehend. As Sarah and Mark tirelessly worked on building the case against the cartel, they began to uncover a network of corruption that extended far beyond what they had initially anticipated. High-ranking officials, influential businessmen, and even some members within the police were discovered to be connected to the cartel's operations. One evening, as Sarah was reviewing the evidence late into the night, a message flashed across her computer screen. It was an anonymous tip, alerting her to a secret meeting that was scheduled to take place between the corrupted officials and the remaining cartel members. The location was a remote mansion on the outskirts of the city. Without wasting a moment, Sarah shared the information with Mark, and they devised a plan to infiltrate the meeting. Disguised as guests attending an exclusive party, Sarah and Mark made their way to the mansion. Their steps barely audible on the plush carpet, they exchanged a tense glance. Sarah leaned closer to Mark and whispered,
We need to find concrete evidence of their collusion. Something that will bring down every last one of them.
Mark nodded, his eyes scanning the room.
Let's split up. Cover more ground and increase our chances of finding something substantial.
As they dispersed, Sarah approached a small study tucked away in a secluded corner of the mansion. She cautiously pushed open the door, revealing a dimly lit room lined with bookshelves filled with antique volumes. The faint sound of hushed voices reached her ears, drawing her attention to a partially ajar door at the back of the study. Carefully, she crept closer and overheard a conversation taking place behind the door. Two voices, one unmistakably belonging to a high-ranking city official, were discussing their plans to manipulate upcoming legislation in favor of the cartel. She reached for her phone, capturing a few seconds of the conversation as proof. Their steps barely audible on the plush carpet, they exchanged a tense glance. But just as she began to retreat, the door creaked open, and the two figures emerged. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the city official, Councilman Peterson, known for his charismatic public persona. The other man was unfamiliar, likely a cartel representative. Realizing her cover was blown, Sarah sprang into action. She stepped forward, holding up her badge with authority.
Councilman Peterson, you're under arrest for conspiracy and corruption. Drop your weapon and put your hands up.
Councilman Peterson's eyes widened with shock and panic.
You have no proof. This is a setup.
Sarah maintained her composure, her voice steady.
Oh, we have proof, Councilman. Your little conversation back there was quite enlightening. And I'm sure it will make quite the impression on a judge and jury.
Mark swiftly joined Sarah's side, his gun trained on the cartel representative.
Don't even think about it. Drop your weapon, or I won't hesitate to shoot.
Sarah locked eyes with Peterson, her voice laced with determination.
It's over, Councilman. Surrender peacefully, and we can ensure a fair trial.
Peterson's voice trembled with a mix of defiance and desperation.
You have no idea what you're up against. My allies won't rest until I'm free.
Mark interjected firmly, his gaze unwavering.
Your allies won't protect you forever. The truth will prevail, and justice will be served.
Their words hung heavy in the air, as if time stood still in that moment. The councilman weighed his options, recognizing that escape was no longer a possibility. Defeated, he slowly raised his hands in surrender. In the interrogation room, Peterson sat across from Sarah and Mark, his composure regained. His eyes held a mix of arrogance and anger.
You think you've won, but you're just pawns in a much larger game.
Sarah leaned forward, her voice firm.
We may be pawns, but we won't stop until we expose every player in this corrupt web.
Mark added, his gaze unwavering.
Your allies can't protect you forever. It's only a matter of time before the truth catches up with them.
Peterson scoffed, attempting to hide his unease.
You have no idea what you're up against. The consequences of crossing them are far more severe than you can imagine.
Sarah smiled confidently.
We've faced challenges before, and we're not backing down. The people deserve to know the truth.
As the interrogation continued, Sarah and Mark knew they were in for a difficult battle. The corruption they had unveiled ran deeper than they had ever anticipated, involving influential figures who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. Their pursuit of the truth had only just begun, and Sarah and Mark were prepared to fight against the odds, knowing that the road ahead would be treacherous. Over the next few days, the news of the cartel's takedown spread like wildfire. The community celebrated the brave actions of the police officers who had made their streets safer. Sarah and Mark became local heroes, although they remained humble, knowing that their work was driven by a commitment to justice.